Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. In this show, together with our guests, we explore different ways in which we can develop a meaningful relationship with our bodies and minds and respond to the current state of the culture in a quest for more integrated and embodied perspectives. Hello and welcome to Material for the Brain podcast. This is Matan Levkovich. Today is the 50th episode of the show, and I'm excited to share it with you because it was a very beautiful, emotional, and meaningful conversation. My guest for this conversation is Smadar Goshen, a choreographer, dancer, and a certified Gaga teacher and Gyrotonic and Gyrokinesis trainer and teacher trainer. Smadar completed her BA in dance and MA in choreography at the Jerusalem Academy for Music and Dance. And since 2011, her pieces are performed on various platforms worldwide. In the yearbook of magazine Tanz 2023, she was honored as one of the 10th promising choreographers and dance pioneers in Germany. And since 2024, she is supported by the state capital Stuttgart and the Landesverband Freie, Tanz-und Theaterschaffende Baden-Wuerttemberg. In our conversation, we explored the tension between personal identity and artistic expression, the role of the body in processing memory and trauma, and the impact of grief on creativity. We talked about ways in which the body carries memories and trauma, and about how Smadar's artistic practice engages with both personal and historical narratives. We talked about the role of dance as a channel for transformation and about the difference between performing to be seen and performing as a medium for something larger. We talked about the instinct to resist being absorbed into a collective identity and about how this tension informs Smadar's work. We talked about Jewish identity, the legacy of the Holocaust, and how Smadar's encounter with a memorial site deeply shifted her perspective. We talked about the war in Israel, about its impact on identity, and about the complex emotions of belonging to a national narrative. We talked about how the body knows things before the mind does, and about the importance of listening to the body in times of transformation. Again, it was a very beautiful and emotional conversation for me, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as I did. And without a further ado, here is Smadar Goshen. Hello, dear Smadar. Welcome to my podcast. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm excited. Nice to see you.
Same here.
Yeah, I think it's been many years ago since we met in the dance field. I think it was in the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance.
Yes, around 2010, something like this, 2011.
Yeah, even a bit earlier. I moved to Europe in 2010, so I think it was 2009.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and recently we met in a special context that maybe we'll not expand directly now, but it was a very nice reminder how much I appreciate you and a good opportunity to invite you to a podcast.
Yeah.
So where do I catch you in life? What are you doing right now? Where are we speaking?
First, I will say thank you for having me, and I'm also very excited to be here. At the moment, I'm at my house in Stuttgart, in Germany. I've been living here since 5 years now. And just on one of my first days off since long weeks, because I'm working on kind of two projects in parallel at the moment. I choreograph and dance, and I also teach movement. So combining all of that together.
What made you move to Germany?
Practically, I moved here with my partner. He got accepted for master's studies here in a university in Stuttgart. But I have a German passport. And for many years, I've been playing around with the idea of moving to Europe and seeing what it means to be a creator here. versus being a creator in Israel. I have experienced that for a few years before we moved here. And my grandfather actually grew up very close to Stuttgart in a village 30 minutes from here. So I'm not sure anymore if it was unconscious, some sort of fate, or or simply life. But I'm here for 5 years already.
Wow. And how is the experience of working in Germany versus working in Israel when it comes to dance? Are you happy?
I'm very happy. It's very different. Of course, I'm not only happy, life is complex. So, but I'm very content in general. The main thing is that I have lots of time and space to explore what is really interesting for me, to keep on asking questions, to keep on maybe breaking some patterns or belief systems that I had growing up in this field, because I've been dancing since a very young age. So in one word, maybe I would say it gives me much more independency, practically, but also in the perspective. Yeah.
I mean, I've never really worked professionally in Israel, but I have few friends and colleagues that are still working there. And I find that maybe one of the biggest differences is a bit this kind of financial scarcity. I don't know if you feel the same, that it's relatively easier to make a living. Do you also have that experience?
Yeah, 100%. Look, I think also if I would have stayed in Israel, I would have worked towards changing the state where I was. I left before I became a part of, for instance, the institution for the Association for Freelance Choreographers, or doing other steps that can help you make a living of it. But I was in a place where I had to work in order to finance my creative work in Israel. And here it's not the same situation at all. It's my main source of it's the main source, my main source of income in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I ask myself, because I'm a curious person, what is the price of this stability and, so to speak, safety? Because sometimes I feel that there is I met some artists from Argentina that shared with me, that there is really almost no money, and people are really doing it out of sheer desire and passion, and there's a certain energy that fuel this necessity to be creative, where sometimes I feel that at least in Austria and maybe also in Germany, there's a certain kind of lack of gratitude and also lack of fierceness around art. It's almost as if we deserve that. That's how it should be, which is beautiful, of course, that we have this, but I think there is some compromise in that.
And if we don't get it, if we don't get the funding, the money, the whatever resource, it's not only money, we don't do it. Which, where I come from, it's just, for me, it's unheard of. Of course you do it. You cannot live without it, and you make it happen no matter what. And I must say that I'm quite happy for having done it in Israel for quite a few years before I moved here, because it inserted this passion. You have to be a little bit of a badass, to make it happen when there's no resources. And this quality gives some added value also when the resources are there.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if it's also, where is the evidence for this quality in the body? Because definitely when I look at, let's say, I mean, again, maybe I'm a bit ignorant, so maybe all the audience, you can forgive me for that. When I imagine Israeli dance or Israeli companies, there is something very powerful, but also a little bit tense and kind of everything is being pushed and it's hard and it's strong. And in Europe, there's much more like somatics and things are very soft and sensitive. So I think it also somehow, not by surprise, appears in the body. I don't know. Do you feel that something changed with your relationship to the body over the last 5 years in a fundamental way that you could kind of sense, or is it hard to zoom out and see yourself from the side?
Something is still changing. It's a long process, but the answer is definitely yes. I still see this urgency and even tension, as you say, at least in my language and in my physicality. But I enjoy working with it and trying to break it and not using it only as like a superpower, because it can be presented like so sexy and so strong and so fierce, like you say. But it can also be presented as something almost paralyzing. You're using so much force that you maybe cannot be sensitive enough to sense what's around you, to look for alternative ways. And I think this is one major thing, that I got the ability to look at this force from different angles and to ask in the movement language, but then it reflects also on life. Where do I really need it? And where can I use something else? Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a good question to ask. So maybe we can start by, if you could take us into a journey a little bit about your biography and what led you to do what you do, and then we can start expanding on the different choreographic projects that you've been doing and diving into those topics.
Yeah. Of course. So I was born in Kiryat in Israel. It's a small town, and most of the girls go dancing and most of the guys go playing. I don't know how it's called in English. Kadur Maim. It's not volleyball.
Water ball sport.
Yes. It's just, these were the two strong fields. I don't know. There were really good teachers for that. And my two older sisters went dancing, and I started at a very young age, when I was 5. And I loved it. And I continued doing it sort of my whole life. When I was 18, I started my military service, which is mandatory in Israel. And it wasn't good for my soul. And I decided to stop dancing completely. And I won't tell all of the details, but I was, after the military, I went looking for theater schools in Jerusalem, and the dance academy was simply very close to one of them. And I said, okay, I'm already here. So I went looking at it, and I ended up starting my bachelor degree there. And that brought me back to dancing when I was 22. And I did my bachelor and master's degree in the dance academy, started choreographing professionally in some platforms in Israel during my studies when I was 24. And I've been creating and dancing since then. And I also teach Gyrotonic and Gyrokinesis and the Gaga movement language. So my work is really constituted of these 3 kind of channels of performing, creating, and teaching.
And what is the ratio between the time you dedicate performing, the time you're choreographing? And are you also dancing for others, or are you mainly kind of creating your own work and performing for your own work?
Today, I hardly dance for others anymore. The last project I did was, I think, in 2022 for a choreographer called Israel Aloni. He's also Israeli and have lived in Sweden for, I think, close to 20 years now. And he has a company there called IL Dance. Yeah, but that was the last project in which I danced for others. Enjoy much more choreographing now. Yeah, so I would say Probably I did already this calculation for my health insurance. Probably around 60% creating, 25% teaching, 15% performing, something like this. Yeah.
And one thing that caught my attention in the conversation we had before the podcast was that I kind of brought my perspective about identity and how dance can be a way for me to dissolve my identity and to move away from that. And then you brought a counter perspective and shared like how for you it's actually quite fundamental in as a tool in the creation to use identity. But what was interesting for me is that within that I also kind of understood from you, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, that despite the fact that your work have been the theme of identity have been surrounding your work, you are still looking for strategies to use it as let's say a springboard to something that binds us beyond identity, rather than something that separates us. So maybe you can start sharing with me one of the choreographic projects that you've been doing recent years, and we can start kind of diving into that topic.
Choosing one of them.
Yes.
You say?
Yes.
Okay. Then maybe what can answer, the topic, tackle it most directly is a piece called Humans that I created in 2021. And it was the second big project that I created here in Germany. And the point where I started from was this tension between individual and the system it's a part of, and the question, I was very busy with how similar people really are to one another, how much they're really different than one another, and what defines different. What does it mean that we're different? And I think a part of one of the reasons I'm busy with that sense ever, but here when I moved to Germany, I met the term diversity from a very different point of view than how I'm used to think of it, because there was something almost flat in, like, to show a diverse cast, let's say, of dancers, you needed to have someone, a person of color, someone older, someone maybe with bigger size, and I don't know, someone who's disabled in some way. And that it seemed a bit ridiculous for me to cling on to diversity in such a reductive way. And I started to work with 4 dancers who, you look at them and you think, okay, they're similar, they're affiliated with the same things. And I was just simply asking the question of how are they different to one another, and how can we really present it through movement? I think bodies show it so well. No person moves like another person when you really look at it in depth.
And so first of all, first question that pops in my mind, because I think that what you're pointing out, that diversity has a certain, let's say, actually, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine who's also a dancer, and she said that she feels that the word diversity used to be the term we used in the dance maybe 10 years ago was like the typecast. What is the typecast of a dancer? You're looking, we need somebody with an Asian look because that's the dancer that is leaving the company, and that's the typecast. And nowadays, that would be considered like, it's really like racist or whatever. But instead we say like, we want a diverse cast. But obviously this term is not just a friendly thing. It's kind of it's really rooted in a certain political presupposition, and I think that just coming and saying, hey, I find it very superficial can already, let's say, create some problems for you. So like how did you negotiate this tension between your perspective, and maybe you can even elaborate more on your perspective about the idea of diversity from a movement perspective, and like, yeah, how did it manifest in reality?
So first of all, I can tell you that I had some people in the administrative team who were kind of asking questions about it. Look, you talk about diversity, but you don't. It's eventually you take the same dancers that you would take to deal with any other topic, and I said right, because it's. I would still choose the dancers I would like to work with, you know? It's not about now looking for people who they appear to be different than one another. So even when this kind of challenge was, or when I was confronted with this, I still said, well, yeah, maybe people can say what they want to say, but I still stand behind the fact that we can look at diversity also between people that appear similar. And the way we worked with it in the piece was actually quite fascinating because, and brought me to develop something that I kept on using then in the rest of my pieces, that we developed some sort of a game that was going on stage that I call it kind of the live element, because it's very simple. Yeah, they had a score, they had rules, but it was live, it was improvised. They had to play the game, and just with quite simple daily functional actions. And just by that, you immediately start to see how differently each person deals with, they had to fall and they had to catch one another, and didn't always work because you didn't know where the next person is going to fall. Can be far from you, can be close to you. They had to announce that they're going to fall, and they could use any word they wanted or any way they wanted to announce that they are going to fall. And at the same time, they had to keep performing a certain material, like sequences of movements. And only that was already fascinating, to see how did they choose to announce that they fall. Do they want to be caught? They don't want to be caught. What they do when they don't manage. Anyway, and I think that already tackled this issue in a nice way. I mean, I think what happened eventually is the people were interested, maybe some in a similar way to how people are interested in a reality show. They were simply interested to see other people behaving. And of course, there was the artistic aspect on top of it, of the was movement, and it was choreographed to a certain extent. This is it eventually. I mean, why do we end up watching reality shows? Because people are different, because, you end up being surprised with how someone's behaving because it's different than how you would.
Yeah, I guess I remember I also had a moment last year within my school that somebody commented on the aspect of diversity within the movement lab, and for me it was kind of curious that fundamentally it doesn't matter from which angle you're looking at the term diversity. You could always pick up a group of people and find what makes the group very homogeneous, and at the same time what makes it very diverse. It's just a question of which parameters you elevate. So like what is the hierarchy of value that you view diversity from? So you can say, okay, like I'm very interested in diversity of height, and you'll see, okay, the group is not homogeneous, but if you look at, diversity of other parameters, you might find that everybody speaks German.
Yeah.
So what is your curiosity around this tension between, let's say, what makes us individuals and what makes us and what is our shared humanity? What is the, let's say, value that drives you to be engaged in that?
I can answer this question from a more more from the brain or more from the heart. So I'll start from the brain, but I'll get to the heart. First of all, I think something very simple, that life are made of oppositions. It's just that's the one of the main forces. It's such a fundamental element, and if we won't take a moment to see how we're different, we won't be able to see how we're similar. It's as simple as that. And maybe it's a bit funny or ironic, but the more I zoom in and invest in looking at the details of the person next to me that make him or her not like me or unlike me, and the more I can get closer to them, because then I can also notice all of the things that how in the whole we're eventually same creature, but we're not one, we're not duplicated. So that's on the mind level, and on the heart level, or maybe it's the guts or the subconscious, or I'm not sure. I think I have a really big issue with any generalization that makes me one with, or makes me part of a group that it's beyond assimilation. I have this feeling, or I can give the simple example of being in a protest or in any ceremony, religious ceremony or non-religious. I really have this aversion. I feel I disappear. I feel there is no acceptance of the individual I am. And I'm not sure I know yet to explain it. I know where it comes, but I know it's a strong drive in my life. It's a part of why I'm dealing with this tension between one and many.
Okay, so there is a certain bodily reaction, or like a gut reaction or heart reaction, whatever you want to name it, that when you feel that your sense of individuality disappear, you are being pulled away, or you need to pull away. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, to resist to it.
But within that, okay, so this drives is encouraging you to find and search for individual flavors within people, and maybe within your dancers, you would say?
Totally. And also when working on a group scene, let's say, it's really important for me to make sure that it's each dancer and each person is seen as themselves, and I'm not trying to make everything, look the same. And on the contrary, I invest a lot in the little details that different dancers can dance differently.
Yeah, I always had the the notion that in dance, when we do a unison, the first layer is that, wow, everybody does the same movement perfectly together. But actually, unison is just like a way to expose that there is no such thing as the same.
Exactly.
Because on the level of details, it's just a matter of how you guide your attention. Because if you just look at the big picture and say like, wow, everybody's similar, but the moment you zoom in, you recognize, wow, there's no way that they move similar.
Yeah. And it can be really impressive that they seem to move the same. And you see it also in nature, in School of Fish or whatever. But I find that there's something even more impressive in being able to shine as an individual within unison, for instance. And as a choreographer or whoever who creates it, you have to invest in allowing it. Dancers are so obedient, and so not all of them, of course. It's also a generalization. But it's something to invest in, to give the freedom for sensing things differently and then expressing it differently, even if the movement is set. And how can you find, what in your body is articulated enough to express something unique in a movement that is set, when you don't choose the movement pattern. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I'm also questioning, because your starting point, which really is very appeals to my preferences about oppositions. So then kind of it brings me to ask, okay, so what about belonging? What about because I totally resonate with this kind of bodily reaction to this erasure of individuality, because I think that, and maybe that's a little bit, and maybe we can expand it. I think that maybe there's also a little bit a certain shared story that is rooted with our shared identity as Jewish people, about this kind of a certain, almost like a instinct that is ingrained from generation. Okay, if you're being targeted based on something that has nothing to do with you, it's not a good thing. But there's also a lot of beautiful qualities that comes when you, I know, I can just imagine okay, when you're in some rave and everybody jumps for the same beat, and then you kind of you just melt into this. Or I had a musician friend that was playing classical music, and I remember that the way he described he said yeah, when I'm playing with the orchestra, it's just like I'm melting into this ocean of sound, and it's I'm just a part of something. How does that play a role within your work? If it plays a role, maybe not.
You ask, how does the beauty of merging with something that is bigger than me, how does it play a role, right?
If it plays a role, because again, your starting point was hey, I'm interested in opposition, and I'm curious, if it appears. I mean, because I think it will always be there whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
The people can look at the stage and say wow, this is a really nice group, and they can see the group.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if it's also something that kind of plays an importance for you.
It does very much. I think the nice thing about dance, or why I love it so much, it's because we're using the same instrument that eventually our audience also use. We use the one instrument that we all have and we all use. We have to use it. Otherwise, there's no living. And beyond what's happening between the dancers on stage, I think the strongest effect, maybe in dance and in performances, is the resonation from the dancing body to the observing body, from one dancing body to another, from one observing body to another. So through dance, through music and dance, through movement, I can very much connect to this aspect, for sure. I think with other stuff in life, I still have a little bit of issue. And yes, it's like what you mentioned, it's living so close to religious and politics connected together, and also the militant system and being a part of it. And it's many, many things that are related to my identity that play a role there. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if it's kind of if to which degree our personalities play a role in that, and to which degree like it's like your upbringing and stuff like that, because I know that for many people, it's like that's the moment people are waiting for. I don't know, to be part of the crowd that is cheering in a football game, or to go to a club and just be another dot in the crowd, or to go to a demonstration and shout the same words. For many people, those experiences are spiritual experiences. And I have also the instinct of like, okay, I can understand it, but I don't want to be there. And that's why maybe for me, contact improvisation is a great hybrid between that, because I can really be an individual, but I am still a part of a jam with other people. There's still this kind of, but I don't need to erase my individuality.
I think it's a lot of personality. I have a sister who became religious, and we grew up in the same family with sort of the same parents. I think one kid doesn't have the exact same parents that another kid have, but so each one can take it completely different path with it.
And another thing that I was quite curious to explore with you, and I don't know in which way you want to dive into that, but this kind of like your journey from, your grandparents moved away from Germany due to the Second World War.
Yep.
And you 2 generations after coming back here. And that's a theme that I've seen with many, many Israelis and German people. And maybe you can a bit elaborate what are you taking from that journey on the individual level, and also like how it shaped your artistic work, or what was the expression through that?
Yeah, definitely. It's quite interesting with me because I think as part of what I was talking about, this resistance to being part of a group, to be identified with something that is maybe not, I don't consider it as such big a part of my identity. I was also, growing up in Israel, I didn't understand why we have to keep talking about the Second World War so much. And it's not, of course, I respect it. I learned about it and everything, but I was also all the time with my face forward, saying, look, guys, come on. And especially after moving to Germany and meeting so much guilt still in younger generations, my approach was, it's in the past, like there are so many good things happening now. It's better to focus on that. And then I think I told you this maybe before. I completely by chance I had stumbled upon a remembrance monument in Germany. It's an old train station that mentions all of the trains that took Jewish people out of Stuttgart to concentration camps during the Second World War. And I found the train that my great-grandmother was on, and I found her name on the wall there. And apparently I understand things the best through my body in this life. And so all of my cynical screens and blockages just fell apart when I was standing on the same ground that she stood on. So the situation was I was standing in the train station where they were loaded on trains and where they left from. And practically the same piece of land. And that was a very shaky. I felt very shook. And I told you my grandfather grew up really close to the village, and she was part of the Jewish community in Stuttgart and the surroundings, and this is how she ended up being exported from there. And eventually I also created a piece, an outdoor walk. There's some dancing in it, but I call it's more of a storytelling. where I tell the story of moving to Germany, being an Israeli immigrant in Germany, understanding so much more about my grandparents who were German immigrants in Israel back then. And today I can see so many things that, I just thought they were weird or different than everybody else. And then today I'm like, okay, they were simply German. I mean, this is the culture where they came from that I grew to learn so much. And so that hit me, bottom line. And moving here, I couldn't escape this part of my identity. And it made me admit, beyond being Jewish, there's part in me that had suffered from it in the past already. Beyond what, I already suffered or experienced living in Israel, in the country of the Jewish people, and it goes way back, and I couldn't ignore it. And of course, I knew the story before. Yeah.
What did you mean when you say that I was already hurt by it? What did you mean by that?
What I felt standing there is that her, I don't even want to call it trauma, because I think the trauma comes after, but her experience, the violence that she experienced, is embedded in me. Like, it's somewhere in my body. This woke up when I was standing on the land and understanding, okay, this is what happened here. And I think I have the power, as long as I'm living in this body, to change the way I experience today, now, like in this lifetime. I cannot change what happened in the past, but I can change how much I acknowledge it, and how, I can change how I see it and how I refer to it. And for me, telling this story to many German people, my community, people that I know, that come to my classes, that dance with me, that was very, it's not even therapeutic, it's healing.
Yeah, maybe I can also share a bit of a story with you, because I think it's like I had a very similar relation to all this childhood education, a little bit of cynicism, or a bit like questioning, okay, what's the deal with, like, what is it in Jewish culture that keeps repeating these stories of victimhood? And I was like questioning, okay, where is our responsibility in it? What are we doing that keeps this going? And but at the same time, I also had like a very hyper intellectual curiosity about the Second World War. Like, I watched every film and like a lot of documentaries and books, and I kind of like wanted to figure out like what makes a human being capable of doing something like that.
Yeah.
And how does it relate to me? Because my mother, she always had this kind of demonizing the Nazi figure. They were not humans, they were monsters, and like not kind of recognizing, okay, no, actually we share humanity with those people.
Yeah.
And in a way, I feel like, I'm quite I don't see myself so much as a victim, and I feel I have a lot of power to change things and to guide my life. But I did a psychedelic ceremony a few years ago here in Austria, and one of the most strong things that happened to me during this ceremony, and later we're reflecting, I was like, where the hell does this come from? And the context of the ceremony, it was about the ancestors. And I don't have any strong connection to my ancestor. All my grandparents died before I was born, and I don't know so much my family tree. I just know, my mother was born in Morocco, my dad's family came from Belarus. But I'm not that connected to that. And during that ceremony, the strongest thing that came to me was this question, like, what are you doing? Why are you living on the land where your ancestors were burned? Like, why are you here? This kind of very strong question.
Yeah.
Which I don't know the answer yet. Why am I here? But I really feel that it's these stories are not stories. They transform into physical cells.
Material, totally.
And I also heard that, there's like some evidence nowadays in neuroscience how you cannot understand reality without a narrative. That's part of perception is narrative. And that kind of shapes our bodies. So do you have any like relation to it on a physical level? Like what do you do with that kind of physically? What do you do with your body? I'm curious, like you said healing, but what does it mean for you? I don't know if it's clear or if it's more intuitive.
Yeah, it's really different stuff. I do with my body different stuff. Think also depends on the event or experience I'm dealing with. Specifically in this story, I'm third generation already. She's my great grandmother. It's like third, fourth, depends how you look at it. I wasn't performing in this piece. I was the storyteller. There were performers. They didn't move a lot. I didn't feel that much movement is needed for this one. Most honestly, I was just allowing everybody at the end to come and give me a hug. People came like bursting in tears. We had to go get tissue from the production for the audience. So there, it was really simply human touch in that case. In another case, I created a solo. I started creating a solo.
Sorry, but I think it's huge. You brush it like, it's yeah, we just human touch, but I think it's huge. No,
yeah,
like tell a bit more about it. Like what happened to? Because I'll tell you what I'm saying, because I feel like you're describing something that maybe in this specific context is so loaded. Okay, a Jewish Israeli person in Germany doing a performance about their grandmother that was the great grandmother that was deported, and there's so much guilt and this, but I think it's huge, like the ability to help people process something in an artistic context. It doesn't happen most of the time. People come to the theater and they come out thinking like, I liked it, I didn't like it. Oh,
yeah.
What was it for you
to
play that role?
Yeah, I will just say what you said now will also bring me to something else I wanted to say, but it's very interesting, this point. I have to say, it's the first time that I tell so literally such a personal story in a piece of mine. Usually it's much more abstract and like you said, I start from a place of identity, but I also bounce into something more collective. And it was quite astonishing how when we started rehearsing this piece and it started also to meet audience, I said, wow, it's the most personal piece I've ever made. And I don't feel like I share something personal from me. I really felt like a channel. Yeah, for it to go through me, for the thing to go through. On the same time, I was also very moved, and sometimes, it was hard for me to speak from how touched I was. But I really felt it's a privilege to allow local people here, to get close to this topic without being judged. And they were not judged, and I didn't take it at all to to the political aspect of it. It opened up a space for them to observe simply, what you can call as non-human, to observe violence, to observe what it meant to... This piece also presented the stories of some other characters from the Jewish community that were there back then, because I couldn't find material about my great-grandmother because she just disappeared, she was vanished. And I was also talking about that, like that I found like holes in the puzzles of my identity. It just allowed them to observe the journey of someone encountering this huge dramatic part in her past that she me. The information I have about it is general from the movies I can see, but not from the people. My grandfather never talked to me about it. And I agree, it's huge. Like, this opened space for them to look at themselves, to touch themselves, to ask themselves what they encounter that was not spoken.
Look, you said something there, and I'm sorry because I'm when I get curious, I'm going to be picky, and if it's hard to articulate, you cannot say, "Look, Matan, leave me alone."
Yes.
But I think you said again something that for me is extremely meaningful. You said, "Look, it's the first time I shared something that is extremely personal, but I was just a channel," which is a bit of a contradiction, so to speak. Again, like, it brings us back to what you said in the beginning, how life is made out of oppositions.
Definitely.
And then exactly in that moment, with this combination, there is an extreme powerful transformation happening. And I think that it's not by chance. I think it's something that it's almost like, these are the ingredients for such, like, if you want to have a transformative soup, you need a bit of a personality, but you need to channel it in a non-personal way. But
absolutely.
But what I'm curious to hear is if it, and I don't know how it's hard to kind of recall it now when you're not in that experience, but maybe you can share a bit, like, what was the actual practice of preparing to do this, and what was the actual experience doing that role, and how it relates to the type of physical intelligence that you have as a dancer.
Yeah.
And I know it's a lot of questions, but let's start what is the preparation for that for you? Was the preparation for that for you? Yeah, maybe that's just a good starting point.
And you're talking about the creation process, not preparing to go on stage.
No. I'm talking about like the moment you do it, because, you can prepare your whole, you can have a lot of ideas, but then, okay, like, what do you do? Okay, now I need to go and do that. Did you have a certain, let's say, routine, how you're going to enter that state, or was it unconscious and then you in retrospective realize, that's what was happened, I didn't expect it? What was that? Because I think it's not I think there is a certain lost element in performing art, that is the performer is very much connected to the role of the shaman in more smaller, more egalitarian cultures where one person is rising above the group to bring the group with them. And within our more hierarchical societies, and I'm not saying it in order to kind of criticize hierarchy and kind of elevate egalitarianism, because that's already an hierarchy, but just to say that now the performer is sometimes, it's almost like a infantile instinct of people to be pulled to stage because they just want to be seen.
Yeah.
And then you're watching a performer that on a metaphysical level is just there to suck energy. He wants to be seen. He needs to, and then like you're talking about something that is the complete opposite. I'm a channel, and then like something can happen through me. And I think it's very interesting to dive into that. So please. If you enjoyed the conversation so far and found it meaningful, please consider to share the episode with others and to click the like button. These small actions might seem meaningless, but they are the fuel that helps the podcast project to move forward. Your attention and time is highly valued, and we would love to hear more about the insights you might have from listening to this episode. And please consider to subscribe to the channel to be notified for all future uploads.
Totally, and I have to say, it made me, like, I had to think about it now. I didn't think about it before, and funnily enough, you know, when you warm up for, or when I warm up for a performance, and all of my colleagues that I know, you work your body to be this inferior creature. Yeah,
Yes.
superior. Sorry, not inferior. To be this on top of yourself, of the world, of your physicality. There's even a certain face to it, you know, like a mirror face sometimes. And in this piece, I mean, I started this piece, I had a neck mic, and I come and people were just standing outside of a church, and I come and I say, "Hi, everybody, I'm Smadar." Most people know me, you know, but still I say, "I'm Smadar, I come from Israel, I live here for already 5 years. This piece is about da-da-da-da-da." So the work was, be yourself. Be yourself. Who are you? You're Smadar. What are you doing here? I just had to talk to myself and come back to what I know about myself. I could only share what I know about myself. You know, some of these things were things I had to research for, and knowledge I collected for this piece. But it was, again, come back to who you are, what you have in your hands, and this is what you're gonna give. And that was really interesting. And I think also, like you say, transformative, because it's such a strong power to use then as a dancer going on stage, no?
Totally. You know, it's funny because what you mentioned, I mean, I never heard the term mirror face before, but maybe I heard something else. But you know, I think like, I think one thing that is really missing in, let's say, modern industrial culture is the notion of initiation, and because also the idea of the elders is non-existing. There is elderly people, but there are no elders to the community. Yeah. The elderly people are those who don't understand what's going on. The world belongs to the young, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that what is very missing is the notion of initiation. So, you know, so I know I did my bar mitzvah, this Jewish ceremony of initiation, but it had some meaning, but not enough. And if I think about my journey into the dance world, it was really coming out of this hyper-individualistic quest of, you know, finding yourself and finding your voice and who you are and blah, blah, blah. And I think that most of the stage experiences I had in my upbringing as a dancer, they were very rooted in like, okay, I wonder what people will say and if it's going to be good, if people will like it, blah, blah, and, you know, like all this nonsense. And only, I think it was 2 years ago, I performed again after 5 years of absence from being on stage. I had that channeling experience in a very open, improvised performance that was about how to expand your consciousness. I just shared my physical practice, and I know that, you know, I'm a specific case of a dancer who didn't go on stage a lot. So I very quickly I went more into choreographing and teaching. And I know that for many others, maybe they will say like, "Hey, Matan, you know, it's obvious that's how you start and you get there." But still, I think that it's just the fact that you say like, yeah, like you know, we get ready to stage. You want to be the best version of yourself on top, but there is something about the self that is busy about.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious about, you know, like what is happened phenomenologically to get there, because I think it has to do with something that is rooted in human consciousness and its capacity of expansion. And maybe in that moment that you say, okay, I'm just myself, there was something that kind of, it's a bit like when you allow something to drop to the floor, so there's an impact that spreads out and you're not holding anything, so something just drops down, and then from there is like a huge expansion and people can feel it, and then they don't need to have this intellectual process of, she's speaking about her grandfather and I understand, but they just immediately feel it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's very not obvious that it happens. That's why I felt that when you were kind of brushing it quickly, it's like, no, that's worth expansion because it's not obvious.
Yeah. I agree. I will add to this, and I wanted to start saying it. It's related to this piece was called Passing, and right after I created this piece, I created a solo piece that was called Ken. In Hebrew, it means yes. And I started to create this piece in June 2023 and was supposed to premiere in November 2023, and then October 7th happened. And I lost someone very dear to me from my family who was killed. And I still performed in January, not in November as it was supposed to, but I kept on going with the piece after or while having this horrible, horrific, dramatic experience. When I was in the most deep, vast ocean of grief, I went on stage alone. It was a solo piece, 1 hour. And for the first time in my whole life, it's not that I didn't care if people will love the piece. I didn't want people to love the piece. I really couldn't stand the thought that I will hand people something to love in this situation. You know what I mean? For me, there was no beauty in the world in this moment, and I didn't want to show people beauty. And at the same time, I care for my audience. Yeah, I didn't want them to suffer.
But this is beautiful. That's already beauty.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess.
Sorry to interrupt your thoughts.
No, completely. I think I learned to understand it. And it also contributed something huge to what I allow myself to put on stage also, and how much I trust my public, or their public. They're not mine. And eventually this piece is painful. I mean, I think you come to see it, if you're open to experience pain, you experience pain. But it's generous, and my experience was that whoever was open to really, to connect to the range of feelings, was appreciating it quite a lot. But it was such a strong state to be at, I'm so not used to create from. It's like you say, it's always important that people will like it, that it will be loved.
How it will be received.
Yeah.
That's the term I remember hearing here in Vienna. But like you kind of ventured into that piece because it was a little bit kind of in my hosting podcast mind that there is this topic, I want to get into that.
Yes.
Because it's a little bit the elephant of the room. We are speaking here about being Jewish, being Israelis, while our country is kind of torn in this 1.5 years of a war.
Yeah.
That impacts dramatically Israelis and Palestinians, and I wonder to which degree you want to open up that topic now, and also feel free to say that maybe it's not something you want to dive into, but if so, I would be interested of hearing, and maybe to the degree that you're willing to share, like what happened to you, and what was the process that, or what was this practice that you developed around the topic of grief.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big thing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to go into the topic. What happened to me is, something that also happened to many, many, many other people in Israel that day. We were here in Stuttgart, and we received a call on the 7th of October at night that my brother-in-law was killed. And he was a soldier, but he was started his studies a year before, so he was kind of on a break from his duty. But when the whole situation started, he was called to gear up and go try and stop save the citizens in the south of the country. And rolling already a few weeks after, when I decided to come back here and to go back to my creation, I couldn't move. But the body was just so paralyzed. Month after, it was not possible to dance. I could do something that looked like dancing. It just didn't feel like me dancing. So I was not connected to... I ask myself until today, because it took really, 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 really long time until I felt I could go back dancing, over a year. And I ask myself if it's just impossible to connect to something that you love so much and that you have passion so much, and something that was defining the self for you before such a dramatic event in your life. Anyway, what I could do, I could use my voice, and there's a musician I'm working with for a few years already. He's been working on a few pieces with me, and we wanted the soundtrack to be, we wanted to use my voice for some of the soundtrack. We just went into the studio and I started singing. This was simply what I did for quite a while. I have to say, half of the solo was already done. It was already created before October. And days kept on going on. It got to be 2 weeks before the premiere, and I got stressed that I don't have the last scene, and I went into the studio working like crazy, blocked the whole reality outside. I created like 5 different options for the last scene, and none of them made sense. And it got to the day of the general rehearsal. I had audience already. I tried something as the last scene, and people left the venue, and I looked at my dramaturg and we were like, okay, it's not working. We just have to find something. And I just started writing. I mean, not just started writing, I started crying. This is what happened. And I cried my heart out in the theater, and went home and started writing. Just where I am, what I think, what I feel. I fell asleep. I remember I was writing in the phone, crying, fell asleep on it, woke up in the morning, grabbed the phone and kept on writing. And I just wrote a monologue, which ended up being the last scene of the piece. So there is nothing that is physical was created after October in the piece. It was simply not possible. There is use of voice, also spoken text on stage, and some more theatrical, one scene that is more theatrical, and a recorded monologue.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Can I share some thoughts of what I'm hearing?
Definitely.
So, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a bit, and it brings me a bit to you started to say, like dance is something I love so much, and the grief and the pain didn't enable me to do something I love, but also, you said, but also something that is very much connected to my identity. And I wonder because I think that, I think that identity at the end of the day, it's something that we make. It's not something that, it's something that exists in a certain realm that is created. It's part of I don't know, like what we do as humans, but it materialized to be part of our bodies in one way or another. But since our bodies are biological and they are bound to the rules of biology and life, we die, and then the identity dies with it. And I think that the encounter with death of somebody loved is almost like some part of my body that has some memories associated with that person, and it's part of my identity. This part is also dying. It's like a certain level of it, on a metaphysical level, some part of it is also dying, and then there is a certain pain that comes with it, and a certain dissolution of that identity. And if I think about and I think that that's also something that is very much lacking in most cultures, at least in Western cultures, and maybe also in Jewish culture, like kind of like how to process that in a meaningful way. I don't know. Did you had the chance to physically be there? I mean, maybe I'll just share quickly with the audience. In the Jewish tradition, when somebody dies, there is something called Shiva, which is a whole week that the family of the person who died sit at home, and people just come for a whole week and just be there. And most of the time depends on the context. I just had my uncle, he passed away last time I was in Israel, and I came to the Shiva. And in some cases, it's also like a moment of like just celebrating the good memories of the person. I guess in the case of let's say like a young person dying in the army, it's hard to just look at the good days. It's probably a lot of sadness of the family. But did you had some moments to process that, or because you said you were in Germany?
Well, we flew on the same day, and of course, like we were there in the funeral, and we landed at night, and the funeral happened the next morning, and then we were there for 2 weeks in the house of the family. So I was there the whole Shiva. And I think, well, I don't know if it would have been different if I was not there, but physically, the life stopped in any term. And also physically, something gets so, you become like a rock. I think it was maybe one of the only times in my life that I didn't really have a body. I have a memory after the Shiva, the next day, after a week, I did this, stretching. And I was like, fuck, I didn't do this. I didn't come near this movement for a week. I do it 100 times a day, usually. I had no body. Like, it was that I didn't matter. And I am my body for me. So if I doesn't matter, my body doesn't matter. It almost doesn't exist. And I think it was also one of the, it only when I came back here to Germany after 2 weeks, I came back alone. It was way too early, looking at it retrospectively, to be alone after 2 weeks. But this is what I did. And I remember, it sounds so dumb also when I say it, but it was such a strong moment of realization. I had to go out from the house in the morning to teach, and I just sat and I didn't know how I'm going to do it. So I asked my body, I said, okay, how are we going to do it? Like, how are we going to stand in front of a group and make them dance? And the answer I received was, look, I'm alive. I'm just keep on doing what I did before, and I keep on doing what I know to do. Heart pumping, blood running. Look at it, it's happening. And for the soul, for the heart, it was hard to accept. But for the body, it was as simple. And it was also the moment of realization, okay, this is what we are. It's either alive or dead. There's no in between.
Yes. It's very strong. Yeah, you said it's very naive, but I think first, yeah, I think it's, I mean, you brought some past memory to me in this conversation we had offline when I was saying, maybe I'll bring the audience with us. We met a bunch of Israeli artists just to talk about like the experience living abroad in the diaspora since this war have erupted, and kind of support one another. And then one person suggested that, hey, maybe we should have some possibility of meeting in the studio. And I said, hey guys, I don't know if you really want to meet me in the studio. I'm quite horrible to work with. And then you said something like, "Hey, yeah, Matan, I just remember you telling me when we were in the academy that yeah, you had some knee injury, and said, hey, yeah, you should talk to your knee and give it a lot of love."
Yes. I told them not to believe you. I told them you are great in the studio. And exactly that you taught me to treat my body nicely and to be grateful.
Yeah, and I think that, it's like something that it's very easy to forget, because I think I'm now dealing with a meniscus injury that I have kind of a clear idea where is it coming from, let's say on a cognitive level, because I don't analyze most of my pains through like a biomechanical lens. Maybe, even if it's like an acute injury, like a crash or something, of course, biomechanics maybe play a role, but I don't think it's the source of things. And it's also took me a very long time to be able to kind of sit down and say, okay, like let me be in communication with my, like, hey buddy, what do you want? And I feel that it's part of the part of the challenge of living in a society that is hyperly dependent on like, mechanized machines, and that the body is so isolated, and that most of our experiences are happening in the head, that you kind of lose this intimacy of conversing with your body. And for most people, it will just sound like esoteric and like, you're like, oh, well, you're a bunch of weirdos. What are you doing? And it is also weird because, like, yes, the body doesn't, like when you say, and the body told me, it's like, who is the body? And but I think that, it's also not more strange than, for me, like, if you really look at it, when you think of what is this voice in your head that tells you things, like it's as strange as that.
It's the same as that.
Yeah, if you really dive into that and you say, okay, there's a voice that tells you things and sometimes judges you, and then sometimes you kind of ignore that voice, and sometimes you listen to it. It's as strange as that, just that the body maybe has something to do with that, and it's a very interesting thing, and I think it's really worth taking the time to allow oneself to have those discussions. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to. I'm not interested so much in framing this conversation around let's say the politics of the conflict and the war, but maybe you can share. And I don't know if that's a fair question, but you can also tell me if you don't feel comfortable. But what did it do to you on this kind of level of identity to lose somebody that is close to you? Because, I can just share quickly, and then I'll give you the stage. I already talked too much. I really went into a very tribal place when this whole war happened. And, I kind of dropped from this universal Matan that sees humanity and is looking for, like, what is the shared denominator between people and how can we write. And suddenly I was like, I'm a Jew, I'm part of this tribe. and I wonder, like, what is this experience did to you?
Yeah. It did something similar. Maybe I felt that it was more forced on me. To me, it did something even more specific than being a Jew. To put it on a timeline, the piece that was created in the old train station where my great-grandmother was taken from premiered in July 2023, and this happened in October. So landing as a Jew happened to me already before. And this made me feel damn Israeli, like goddamn Israeli, in a different sense that what I felt before. So Jewish Israeli. I had and still have lots of anger towards the militant pathos that we are being fed with in Israel, at the same time as I see the reality clearly, and I see, like, the need for the country to defend itself. And I will close the political part in that. But it was very, very hard to accept that this thing that I have so much criticized for is becoming a part of my personal narrative, and that I cannot escape it, and that I fly back to Israel now for the National Memorial Day for soldiers who were killed while protecting the country in wars, and that I sit with the, I don't know how to say משפחות שכולות in English, the families who lost soldiers, people who were,
grieving families.
Yeah, exactly, the grieving families. And so, but at the same time that it was so hard for me, I immediately accepted it. There was no question. It was like, okay, this is also me now. And going back to where we started the conversation, it put me as a part of this group. And whether I liked it or not, I'm a part of this group. I don't even have the will to resist it, because this will to a certain extent eliminate, maybe, I don't want to ignore that is the narrative of how he was killed. Yeah.
Yeah, you said something, when you said like I'm criticizing the pathos while still recognizing its necessity, and I think it's kind of something I can really relate to, because I feel that in that regard, and maybe you feel the same. I feel in the world like I'm politically I'm homeless. I don't feel comfortable anywhere. Like no matter where you situate me, I will feel certain things like, okay, it's okay, but I don't feel like, yeah, that's my tribe, and I'm here gonna fight for this political cause. I always feel like up to that place, and when you enter that field, now I feel completely stranger, and I'm in the out group, and so it's very hard for me to be politically active, because I feel like there is no direction I'm willing to push, because it's not
because of oppositions.
Yeah, maybe because I feel like maybe that's maybe the right frame for that. But maybe maybe I can share some thoughts with you and the audience to kind of also take this conversation into a bit of a optimistic, hopeful vision before we wrap up this beautiful episode with you, Smadar. I was thinking a lot, like when October 7 happened and this kind of horrible thing started to happen, I really felt like my first reaction was that, whoa, there's like certain demonic forces in the world, and now this is their expression. They're like this kind of really violent terror attack, people who kind of come and can kind of be indifferent to torture. They can torture people, and they just kind of can at the same time take a Coca-Cola from the fridge, and they're like horrible demons, and like, I couldn't have any rational thing to explain it. So it's and also, like if you kind of hear, like, let's say kind of more pro-Israeli people who analyze this, so they would like criticize this kind of Hamas as a death cult of fanatic religious who view death as the salvation. And what I feel like, and people would also frame Israel under this kind of Judeo-Christian values that really see the let's say the divine spark in every individual. So God is shining through every individual. So that's why we have to protect life. It's such a precious thing. And if we're talking about opposition, that's a big fundamental opposition, because like one thing that you keep hearing in jihadist group, and I'm not here trying to defend jihad, but they say very clearly, like, we celebrate death. For us, death is not something we're afraid of. We celebrate it. And I think that's kind of an opposition that we still haven't solved. Nor the Judeo-Christians societies, nor the jihadists, because we are just holding into these opposing forces, one that celebrate deaths and embrace it fully and say like, no, death is the gate for the next thing, and ignores life to the level that, it uses its own people as human shield, and because it celebrates death. And on the other hand, we have a lot of work to do with like kind of just recognizing how death is fundamental to life. And like if you look at it from on the extreme cases that, in Western science, people wants to solve death. It's like we have to overcome biology to solve this problem. Death is just a problem that we need to overcome with science. And these are two oppositions that needs to come together. And I think that to some extent, for me, I see a hope for unity between those cultural opposition that fundamentally, at the end, they lead to conflict and war. And if there is some possible unity, I would say that it can start also with the perspective of unifying the love for life and the ecstatic excitement towards the salvation of the martyrdom, and how these two opposition can come together.
Yeah, and also bringing it back to the body. Yeah, respecting it's a specific machine, instrument, creature, depends how you want to look at it. It has its features. One of its features is growing old, is decaying, and composting, finding a way to be a part of this world also after dying, in a materialistic way and also in a more spiritual way. And, not even going into what I believe in specifically, but it has its way, it has its path to do. And on this path, things happen like what we talk about, these transformations, we do work while living. Our body, our material, it does work. Yeah.
Completely. Hey, Smadar, before we wrap up, I want to just give you some space here to share with the audience. If people are excited and curious hearing you, maybe you can kind of share a little bit of possibilities to meet you in person and online. And I will definitely also have everything in the show notes, so you don't need to be worried so much about this, the specificity of the URLs.
Yes.
But just kind of share a little bit where, I don't know, if teaching, if people are curious to learn with you, see your performances, maybe dance for you if they're in the professional field.
Yeah. So definitely, I love people and I love meeting people. So, and you can reach me. Most of the information is available on my website. It's simply my name, smadargoshen.com. And my email address is also very easy. go@smadargoshen.com. If you want to contact me, you have it on the website as well. I teach Gaga classes. I teach Gyrotonic and Gyrokinesis courses. I teach some movement research workshops. And I perform. My next premiere is happening in March in Stuttgart. Everybody's super welcome. And teaching happens in many different places in Europe. So yeah, just go on my website and check where I'm going next and come say hello.
And are you also available on different social medias?
Yes, Instagram, Smadar Goshen, Facebook, Smadar Goshen, and that's it, I think.
So I want to thank you for your time. It's been a very precious conversation for me personally, and I hope that also everybody who is listening can take something from it, and thank you for your time. If you want to see more precious and insightful moments, make sure to check our short clips playlist. To see longer interviews, check out the full episode playlist just below it. And to be notified for all future videos, click the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notification bell. See you on the next episode.